Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is taking these huge stacks of complex sources and, well, boiling them down into pure insight, giving you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
hmm
And today we're diving into something really fundamental, uh, deeply human, you could say. It's the psychology behind how people connect with, well, the divine.
Right. We've gathered material from the psychology of religion field.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear up front, we're absolutely not getting into theology or, specific beliefs here.
No, definitely not.
It's about the behavioral science, how practices like, say, structured worship or personal prayer, or even these big spiritual shifts, how they actually function in the human mind.
And how they impact personality, our choices, maybe even our physical health.
Exactly. That's what the sources explore.
So the idea is these aren't just like religious obligations people tick off a list. Our sources argue they're actually really powerful psychological tools.
That's the core argument, yes.
So we're going to try and extract the functional benefits, the sort of deep-seated reasons why people do these things. Let's kick off with maybe the most basic, the most universal act, talking to the absolute, prayer.
Prayer, or dua, as it's termed in Arabic, which literally means calling or inviting.
Uh-huh.
Essentially, it's this communication where the believer lays out their situation, acknowledges their limits,
Right.
and then appeals for help from a power they see as, well, greater than themselves, an absolute power.
And that straight away points to the core reason, doesn't it? It starts with admitting you're limited. We all have these massive hopes and fears, but realistically, our own strength to deal with huge problems is, well, it's finite.
Precisely. Finite strength, infinite desires, you could say. So we reach out. Sometimes it's for material things, success, health, maybe wealth, children.
Sure.
But just as often, maybe even more often, it's for inner things. Spiritual stability, psychological stuff like love, happiness, peace of mind. But the most powerful driver, according to the research, it seems to be seeking immediate relief. Relief from feeling helpless or deprived or just deep distress.
It's like the emergency button. I found it fascinating that the sources say even people who don't identify as believers, in moments of just extreme danger, like a sudden accident or a life or death situation, they might instinctively pray. It's almost like a built-in coping strategy.
It really seems to be. But it's not just for crises. Prayer is also about maintenance, if you like. Expressing gratitude is a big one. Think grace before meals.
Right.
Or seeking forgiveness, repentance, that whole process of admitting you messed up and asking for pardon, psychologically that lifts a huge weight, the burden of guilt, of feeling sinful.
Yeah, I can see that. And the different types of prayer were interesting too. I mean, beyond just praying alone versus in a group.
Like verbal versus silent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Verbal prayer is obvious, but silent prayer, that kind of mental, heart-focused
Yeah.
connection. Expressing love or awe or reliance without needing specific words, the sources said that has its own dynamism.
It does. And then there's this other crucial distinction, active or practical prayer versus just verbal prayer. Fili dua, they call it.
Okay, what's the difference there?
It's key because it frames prayer with an action. Practical prayer means you have to do absolutely everything you can first. Use all your abilities, exhaust all the means available to you.
Ah, so you don't just sit back and ask.
No, only after you've done everything possible. Then verbal prayer comes in asking for help with what's genuinely beyond your control or capacity. It links reliance with effort.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's talk impact. The immediate psychological effects seem, well, pretty dramatic.
They are. There was one study mentioned. With middle schoolers, 93% of them reported feeling significant relief and peace when they prayed.
93%, that's huge. It's like an instant soothing effect on the nervous system.
It acts like a psychological balm almost immediately. It cuts down feelings of loneliness. It buffers against anxiety, pessimism. And it really boosts hope. Because you're consciously relying on divine help, you feel less alone with the problem.
Okay, that's the mental side. But this is where, for me, it gets really, really interesting. And honestly, a bit harder to wrap my head around, the link to physical health.
Ah, yes. This is a major focus in the psychology of religion. You look at researchers like Dr. Herbert Benson at Harvard, who studied this for decades.
Right. I've heard of his work.
His findings suggest that belief, or faith, can have this enormous healing effect. He put it at potentially 60 to 90% influence on recovery from illness.
60 to 90%, that's massive.
And the data keeps showing patterns. People who regularly worship tend to live longer, they get sick less often, their hospital stays are shorter if they do get sick.
Okay, but I have to push back a bit here. The classic question, correlation or causation? People who are part of a religious community often have stronger social networks, right? Maybe they have healthier lifestyles, less drinking, smoking. Couldn't that explain the longer lives, the better health outcomes?
That's the critical question, absolutely. And researchers do try to control for those variables, social support, lifestyle factors. But some findings are harder to explain away just with those things,
Like what?
like the study on heart surgery patients. Those who reported engaging in religious activity had a postoperative mortality risk that was 14 times lower than those with no reported religious activity.
14 times.
14 times. Now, lifestyle and social support matter, no doubt, but a difference of that magnitude, it strongly suggests there might be another powerful factor at play, directly linked to the faith or practice itself.
Wow, okay, 14 times lower risk. That's hard to ignore.
And then you have these other documented cases, like the one studied at Lourdes. People reporting rapid, medically unexpected healing from serious conditions, things like cancers, ulcers, kidney diseases, seemingly connected to intense prayer and suggestion.
Right, the Lourdes phenomena.
The really interesting bit there, the sources emphasize, is what they call the explosive effect. The healing wasn't just happening, it was happening way faster than any normal medical recovery timeline would predict.
Okay.
And here's the kicker. This effect was sometimes observed even in people who weren't believers themselves, or even in infants. If someone nearby was praying intensely for them.
Wait, really? So someone else's prayer could have a measurable physical effect on another person, even a baby or someone who doesn't share the belief?
That's what some of these documented accounts suggest. It implies that the intensity and sincerity of the faith, even when it's coming from someone else, might trigger some kind of physiological response that accelerates healing. It raises massive questions about, well, about how belief works, maybe even non-locally.
Okay, my mind is officially a little blown by that. That's a really powerful idea to grapple with. And it actually leads us nicely into the next area. If personal prayer, dua, is that immediate lifeline, that direct communication, what about the more structured systems designed to keep that spiritual connection active? Worship. Ibadah, I think the sources called it.
Exactly. Ibadah. So dua or prayer is flexible. Anytime, anywhere, any form, really. Ibadah or worship is different. It involves fixed actions, specific words, movements, often set times and conditions.
Like the daily prayers in Islam, or pilgrimage, or fasting during Ramadan.
Precisely those kinds of things. They're defined by these immutable, divinely set structures. The psychological purpose of Ibadah is to consciously express and reinforce servitude and allegiance through these ritual actions.
So it's less spontaneous communication, more like a structured discipline, designed to keep religious awareness alive, stop you from drifting away.
That's a good way to put it. It's a proactive shaping of the mind and behavior.
Okay, so how does that structured practice shape thinking and emotion over the long haul?
On the thinking side, it pushes the mind beyond just the everyday, the physical, the mundane. Engaging in these rituals forces you to reflect, helps you search for meaning for the purpose of life. It also kind of mandates self-critique. It's hard to keep doing these acts and ignore your own flaws.
Makes you look inward more often.
Yes. And cognitively, it tends to foster a more optimistic outlook. The sources use this phrase, thinking of the rose, not the thorn, focusing on the positive, the potential, the divine grace, rather than just the difficulties.
And what about the emotional side?
Oh, yeah.
Especially the group aspect. Communal worship feels like it would be a huge engine for social bonding.
Oh, absolutely massive. Worship activates a whole range of positive emotions. Love, awe, gratitude, even a healthy fear or reverence. But when you do it together, millions of people performing the exact same actions at the same time, standing shoulder to shoulder, creates this incredibly powerful feeling of brotherhood, solidarity, and maybe most importantly, belonging. You are part of something vast and shared.
I can see that. So that handles the social glue. But what about the individual? How does the structure of Ibadah shape character? Tame the ego, maybe?
Well, the physical acts themselves are designed to instill humility. Things like bowing down, placing your forehead on the ground. Doing that repeatedly is a physical reminder of your own limitations, that worldly status rank, wealth, looks is temporary.
It's like behavioral therapy against pride.
In a way, yes, it's a constant corrective. And think about the social equality aspect within the ritual itself. When people stand shoulder to shoulder for prayer, rich next to poor, boss next to employee.
Status disappears in that moment.
Exactly. The ritual physically demonstrates that everyone is equal before the divine. It's a powerful countermessage to social hierarchies.
Okay, so humility, equality, what else?
Willpower. Definitely willpower. Sticking to these fixed duties, sometimes controlling basic urges like during fasting, it strengthens your ability to manage desires, to resist impulses. It gives you a kind of freedom, actually.
Freedom. How so?
Freedom from being just, enslaved by worldly wants, by material things, by your own conflicting desires. It helps build a more principled, honorable personality, less driven by immediate gratification.
And all of this presumably feeds into how you see yourself, your self-concept.
Yes, the sources talk about Benlick, which is like self-concept or personality structure. Worship helps build self-awareness, knowing your weaknesses, but also your strengths. And crucially, it reinforces the idea that your real value comes from your devotion, your character, not from money or status.
So your sense of worth becomes internal, based on your relationship with the divine rather than external validation.
Precisely. Which boosts genuine self-respect and confidence. It acts like a spiritual repair kit, mending psychological wounds, clearing the spirit, leading to more autonomy. You're less dependent on what others think.
That's a really powerful function, providing that internal anchor of self-worth. Okay, this brings us to the most dramatic kind of change. Dini Dijishim. Spiritual or religious change?
Right. And this term covers a spectrum. It can be any shift, mental, emotional, behavioral, related to your religious beliefs or practices.
So not just switching religions entirely.
No, the most common form, actually, is considered tube. That's repentance. It's seen as a positive change, basically. Turning back from a sin, something that goes against your religious values, and returning to alignment.
And the scholar Al-Ghazali had a specific model for how that works psychologically, didn't he? To make it truly effective.
He did. He described it as three-dimensional, needing all three parts to really resolve the inner tension and guilt. First is knowing you have to intellectually recognize what you did wrong.
Okay, step one, awareness.
Step two is regretting, feeling genuine emotional remorse, not just acknowledging it mentally, real regret.
The emotional component?
And step three is acting, making a firm commitment, deciding you won't do it again. It's that combination knowledge, feeling, action that brings inner peace and stops you from feeling hopeless about your mistakes.
That makes sense. A structured way to process guilt and move forward. But then there's the bigger leap. Conversion. Dindeleistreme. Switching faiths entirely.
Yes. And the sources are clear. This is actually pretty rare and usually very difficult. It often takes a long time, a preparatory period. There's a quote, something like, "Rome can be built more easily than a person can be converted in a day."
Wow. Why so tough?
Well, think about it. You're potentially changing core parts of your identity, your social world, your fundamental understanding of reality. It usually takes a major life crisis or some kind of intense, prolonged inner conflict to push someone towards such a radical shift.
Okay, so what does push them? The sources mention different drivers, often working together.
Right. Researchers often group them into three main categories. First, there are the intellectual or mental drivers.
Like searching for answers?
Exactly. Trying to find cognitive satisfaction, resolve nagging doubts, find the meaning of life, fill that existential void Viktor Frankl talked about. The example of Muhammad Ali was mentioned. He spoke about seeking relief from this deep inner unhappiness and tension he couldn't resolve.
Looking for a framework that makes sense of the world or provides social justice, maybe?
That too. Seeking principles of equality or justice that they feel are missing in their current situation or belief system.
Okay, so intellectual searching. What's the second driver?
Emotional or sometimes traumatic triggers. A conversion might be sparked by severe stress, a major loss, intense trauma, or overwhelming feelings of guilt or sinfulness. Some researchers argue that this kind of extreme psychological tension is often almost a requirement for a conversion to happen.
Like it shakes your foundation so much you have to find a new structure.
Something like that, yes. It creates the opening for radical change.
And the third category, sociocultural factors.
Right. And this is where you see some really interesting examples. One powerful factor is simply being positively influenced by the behavior of people from another faith.
How they act matters more than what they say.
Huge factor.
Right.
There's this historical example from the Crusades. Apparently, some defeated crusaders were treated with extraordinary kindness by their Turkish captors, wounds bandaged, food shared. This was in stark contrast to the cruelty they'd experienced from some of their supposed Christian allies.
Wow.
And seeing that difference in ethical conduct, it led many of those crusaders to voluntarily convert to the faith of the people who showed them kindness, actions speaking louder than words.
That's incredible. A powerful lesson in how behavior influences belief. What about more modern sociocultural reasons?
Well, marriage is a common one, converting for love or maybe for the social security that comes with joining the partner's family and community.
But that sounds like it could be tricky psychologically.
Extremely tricky. If the conversion isn't genuinely felt, if it's purely for the external reason like marriage, the person can end up feeling immense guilt, like they've betrayed themselves. The sources mentioned cases of people suffering inner turmoil for years because of this.
A conflict between the outer change and inner belief.
Exactly. And then there's group influence, seeking support or security. Some modern research, looking at Christian converts in Turkey, for example, found motivations linked to needing material help or economic support, often combined with strong emotional appeals being offered love, acceptance, community, alongside messages about salvation or relief from guilt.
So, a mix of practical needs and emotional connection. The whole process sounds complex. Is there like a typical path or model?
There are models, yeah. They generally show a movement starting with that inner tension we talked about, leading to active searching. Then there's often a critical threshold, maybe a major life event like a marriage, a job loss, a move.
The turning point.
Right. And at that point, they encounter the new group or belief system. If an emotional bond forms with people in that new group, that's often the key step that solidifies the change and leads to shifting social circles.
That emotional connection seems crucial for making it stick.
It provides the support structure and reinforces the new identity.
Okay, so pulling this all together for you listening, we've looked at prayer as this tool for immediate relief and connection. We've looked at structured worship as a system for stability, character building, and maintaining spiritual awareness. And we've looked at religious change, like repentance and conversion, as mechanisms for profound realignment, dealing with guilt or finding a new path entirely.
Yeah, and seen together, they really function as this powerful psychological toolkit, helping manage guilt, shape who you are, provide resilience against, all the stresses life throws at you.
The big takeaway seems to be that these aren't just abstract beliefs. They are practices with tangible psychological effects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's a crucial caveat. The sources stress again and again their effectiveness, how much psychological benefit you actually get, seems directly tied to the sincerity, the depth, the dedication you bring to them.
So just going through the motions doesn't cut it.
Apparently not. The commitment, the genuineness that seems to be the active ingredient, the fuel for the psychological engine.
Which loops us all the way back to those startling healing examples we started with. The idea that the body might physically respond to these spiritual acts.
Even potentially to the sincere faith of someone else praying for you.
Right, and that leaves us with a pretty mind-bending final thought, doesn't it? Something the research really makes you consider.
Which is,
If the quality, the sheer intensity of someone's sincere belief can potentially be measured by its tangible effect on physical healing, even healing in another person. What does that really tell us about the hidden power of focused, genuine intention? About the deep interconnectedness maybe we don't fully understand?
a profound question indeed. What is that hidden power and how does it actually work?
Something to definitely ponder. That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time.